Hi guys, my name is Nicole and I'm currently a content intern with Management Consulted, and I'm also an incoming associate consultant at Bain in the Boston office. So today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about what it was like to be an intern in the Bain office. I interned there last summer, and just talk a little about what it was like to be an intern, what our weeks looked like, what our days looked like, and some fun, memorable experiences that I had at the internship. So to start off, I'll just give a little bit of a quick overview on what the internship application was like, and then kind of how I got the internship. For a more detailed look into this process, we recorded a different podcast episode on how I got the internship, so definitely look out for that episode if you're more interested in the application process. But I started considering recruiting for consulting probably in June after my second year. And I was lucky to have an internship that was kind of growth marketing based, which is very similar to consulting in terms of the problems that you're solving, but definitely more focused on the marketing niche. So through that experience, I decided that I wanted to do recruiting for consulting. So that July, I would say mid-July about, I started reaching out to different people, doing networking, and started to get pretty serious about doing the consultant recruiting process. At the time, the deadlines were a little bit different. So it was this was the first summer that they had offered a July application deadline and then also the September application deadline. And I knew I wasn't going to be ready for the July one. So I knew I wanted to submit my application in September. So I spent the rest of the summer and the month in September leading up to the final application deadline working on casing, networking, working on really making my application unique in any way I could. So that's kind of what the application process was like. And I think that something I did throughout the process that really helped me was I was really intentional about networking, really intentional about how I prepared myself, really intentional about who I talked to. So I think that's a really good way to make sure that you're meeting the people that will be able to help you a lot and make sure that your recruiting process is as smooth as possible. But for more information on that, definitely go to the other podcast episode because I talk a lot more about the process there. So kind of jumping into the episode, this is kind of what a week in the life of a Bain intern is like. Obviously, every week is different, and weeks and days look different for different interns based on the case that you're working on. But this is kind of a general outline of some of the responsibilities that I had as an intern and also some of the fun events that we got to go to as interns. So, I would arrive to the office every day around 8:30, 8:45, depending on what we had in store for the week. My first meeting of the day typically wasn't until 9:30 a.m., but I really like to use that 15 to 20 minutes to myself in the morning to catch up on any emails, write out my to-do list for the day, and then send out a morning message to my supervisor so that he would know what my priorities were for the day and he could assign me more work or kind of move around my priorities accordingly. And that was a really helpful way to get started. And I think that was really helpful for him for his first message of the day to be what I was working on. So he could think about what's on my to-do list. Okay, this I'll give to Nicole, or this I want to do myself. This I'll help her through because she doesn't know how to do it. So that kind of thing. That's what every morning kind of looked like, doing that same process. And it became kind of routine. My first meeting of the day was typically around 9:30 a.m. And that was with my work stream, which is a small team of 3 to 4 people that reports to the manager on the case. And typically on one case team, there are typically 2 work streams, sometimes 3 if it's a bigger case. But it's kind of broken down. So one work stream is working on one specific deliverable or one specific goal. And for our project in case, we were working on one specific thing while the other work stream was working on a different specific project. So my work stream was me, my supervisor, who was an AC2, which is an associate consultant in the second year of his associate consultancy. And then my supervisor's supervisor was a C1, so a consultant in the first year of her consultancy. And in this meeting, it was pretty informal. We'd always catch up about what our nights had been like, what our weekends were like. And then we would talk about our priorities for the day and week. And then we would also talk about who would be presenting what information to our manager / the other work stream in our meeting with everyone. So that's typically what we covered in that meeting. And After that meeting, would do some independent work. Sometimes I'd meet again with my supervisor, just one-on-one, so that we could go over anything that his supervisor had told him or his supervisor had touched on in the meeting that I wasn't aware of, that I maybe needed more detail on, things like that. But that time in between would kind of differ based on what we were working on for that day or week. And so my manager was based in the LA office. So our first team check-in of the day with both of the two work streams and the manager was at 12:30 p.m. That definitely was different for a lot of other teams. A lot of times people have team meetings around 9:30, 10. But because she was LA based, 12:30 was kind of the earliest that made sense. And in this meeting, our manager would listen to what we had done, what our priorities for the day were, and then reassign and give new assignments accordingly, or tell us to kind of reprioritize what we were working on. And this was also a good way for us to learn about what the other work stream was working on, just so we could make sure that we were all kind of in alignment, even if we were doing different projects. So after that check-in, I didn't really have a set lunchtime. It was kind of whenever we had time between meetings, but I typically would use lunch to get to meet new people in the office and hear more about their work at Bain. Our supervisors and teams and just our recruiters in general were really great about encouraging us to reach out to people at the office who might have worked on cases that we were interested in or did extra tens that we were interested in, things like that. So just using that time to really get to know the other people in your office, which I really enjoyed doing. And I thought it was a great way to meet older people who weren't on my case team, people who were managers, things like that. But also sometimes would eat lunch with my team, would eat lunch with other interns, would just kind of depend on what the day was like and who was kind of free at that time. Afternoons were typically used to work on the projects that we were assigned to, so we would do a lot of independent work. My supervisor and I would work pretty closely together, which I think is the case with a lot of interns and supervisors, just because interns obviously have a little bit less experience than everyone else in the office, so they would use a little bit more guidance from supervisors and from other team members, but it kind of would depend on what we were doing. And so a lot of time that was independent work where we would do whatever we were working on for our projects. And then at the end of the day, which is not the actual end of the day, but kind of the last team meeting of the day around 4:15 p.m., we would have our end of day meeting where we would discuss what we had done and then what priorities were for the rest of the night, which was a good way to get to know how much work you had on your plate for the rest of the night. So you kind of divvy that up accordingly and then also prioritize what you needed to have done for the next day and what maybe could wait one more day to be done. And then all of our meetings would end with something that Bain calls team fun. So we would do a fun game with the whole team, whether it was doing the Wordle together, doing Pictionary, just fun games like that, which is fun and a good way to get to know other people on your team in a more informal environment and didn't always just feel like we were just always talking about work. We got to mix some fun into that as well, which was really awesome. I typically left the office around 6 to 7 p.m., but my case was an internal case, which meant that our client was Bain instead of having an external client. So that definitely meant that we had a little bit of a lighter load than some of the interns that were doing things like PEG or who were on really tiring cases. And then I actually lived with 3 other interns who went to college with me at UVA. So at night we kind of get to talk about what our days were like, and then oftentimes we would just hang out, maybe watch TV for a little and then go to bed, just because you are oftentimes pretty tired after a day at the office. And then so on Tuesdays, pretty much the same standing meetings. So we would have that 9:30 check-in with me, with my work stream, that 12:30 check-in with the team, and then the 4:15 end of day with everyone with the same team as before. But obviously day-to-day work would vary based on what we were working towards for the week. So one of my big projects was building out a survey cutter for a survey that I had created the week earlier. So when I was working on that, a lot of my free time was spent working on that survey cutter and setting up meetings with people who had built out survey cutters before so that they could kind of help me and share their expertise with me so I could make sure that I was doing it as efficiently as possible. On Wednesday was a fun day because it was always Bagel Wednesdays in the office. So Bain would provide a ton of bagels for everyone, which is a really fun way to get to kind of see people in the office and get to hang out a little bit over a bagel. And that was just fun because Bain would make sure to mix in fun events and surprises throughout the week so that interns would get to experience all of the benefits of working at an office like Bain, as well as like getting exposed to obviously really important work that Bain is doing. So that was a special fun treat for Wednesdays. Again, Thursdays, we would have the same standing meetings. Sometimes on Thursdays, we would have meetings with important shareholders that we were hoping to get information from or feedback from. But again, this would kind of differ on what we were working on, what we were doing, and the schedules of everyone that was involved, just because we had some people who were in different time zones. So it was important that we were able to schedule those when we could. And then Friday was a fun day because that was the day that we would do our full team meeting with not only like our other work stream and our manager, but also the partner on our case. And then since my case team was an internal case team, we also got to work with people from other realms of Bain besides just the people who are on the consulting side. So as people who are on the global PD and performance team, people who were more on other more internal teams. So that was like always a big meeting. A lot of people were in the office, but then some people were in other places like Chicago, LA, wherever, New York, wherever that may be, so that we'd have a bunch of people on Zoom as well. And we normally have a pretty specific agenda for this meeting just because we only have like an hour and we had a lot of things that we'd want to get through. So again, depending on what we were working on, we'd either have like everyone go around and talk about what we were working on, or we would, if we had one specific thing or one specific meeting that we were looking for, we would talk about that. And then we'd always do a little bit of team fun, something fun with the whole team, which is a great way to get to know more people. So that's kind of what a week in the life would look like for an intern. Obviously, it's more specific to the case that I was on and the work that I was doing, but I think that a lot of the schedules are kind of the same. With consulting, it's not like your day-to-day is going to be the same every day. So obviously things would change, and this isn't what every single week look like. But I think this is a pretty good general outline of what a week in the life of a Bain intern looked like. So I think just a few tips I have on trying to be the best intern that you can be and make sure that you're really utilizing your time there is, first of all, don't be afraid to take initiative. I think when I started out, I felt really inexperienced and was definitely really wary to like add my voice into the mix just because I didn't necessarily feel qualified to speak on the things that we were working on. But I think my supervisor, my manager, they were all great about really encouraging me to like give my perspective and give my thoughts. So I think don't forget to take initiative and don't forget that you always have important things to add to the conversation. And sometimes a new, fresh perspective can be really important and exactly what the team needs to kind of get the work moving forward, especially if it's something that they're really in the weeds with. So being able to have someone with a perspective that's a little bit more expansive can be really helpful. I think another thing that I'd say is always make sure that you're asking for feedback and asking for ways that you can improve. I think that showing that you're open to constructive criticism is a really great way to show your supervisor, your manager, the partner on your case, not only that you really care about the work you're doing and making sure that you're producing top quality work, but it also shows that you really want to improve and be better. And I think that's always really important. And I think people at Bain really value that kind of attitude and mentality. Because you don't want to be like complacent and just thinking, okay, well, I got the job and now I can just sit here and like do the bare minimum. I think you always want to be seeing like how else you can improve and what else you can do to be better consultant, like be a better supervisee, whatever it is. And then finally, I would say be willing to jump in and try new things. I think that there were a lot of times where my supervisor would ask me to do something that was definitely a little bit outside of my comfort zone, like something that I hadn't had experience with or something that I didn't know or didn't feel like I could necessarily handle on my own. But I think something that he really valued was that I always said, great, I have X, Y, and Z, which might be relevant to this. I don't have specific experience with this, but I'm happy to jump in and like do a first pass at it. And then maybe we can go over it together and see how I can improve. And I think that also shows that like you really do want to learn and you really want to do things and take ownership over your own work. And I think that's awesome for a supervisor who definitely wants to be guiding you as much as they can, but doesn't necessarily want to be holding your hand through every single experience that you might be doing. So I think those are a few ways to be a really great intern and also just make sure that you're doing everything you can to kind of convert that internship into a return offer. And then I would say last summer was just such an incredible experience. I think there are so many things that I remember and like take with me from the internship, but there are definitely a few things that stick out to me as being specifically memorable. I think in terms of my learning and my work, one of the things that really taught me how to take ownership over my work and creatively problem solve was building out that survey cutter that I had mentioned before on my own, and then getting to present the results to my full team. That was a really good learning experience for me. I think from start to finish, I really learned how to like take ownership, how to utilize the people around me to kind of help me with things that I didn't know how to do, and then also how to be creative and be able to problem solve when I kind of ran into a roadblock and I had no idea how to get around it. But yeah, that's definitely a really memorable experience for me in terms of my learning and the things that I learned from my internship. And then I think another thing that really sticks out to me is that Bain is really intentional about creating a good work-life balance for their employees. So one of my favorite memories from the summer is one of the last days of the internship where all the interns got to go out on a fun paddle boat for the day and then spend the afternoon together at Bar Taco. So I think that it was really great because the mix between all of the fun things and all of the bonding moments with the interns, as well as all of the work that we got to do, really made it the perfect experience. And I'm so grateful that I was able to have that experience with Bain. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that you got some good tips on how to convert the internship into an offer and also what it's like to be an intern at Bain.